It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Can we just review what exactly is factual information? You know what I'm saying? Because I know there's a lot of speculation at the moment, and I know, I agree with both of you. The more I hear, the more people I talk to, it seems like something's going to happen. Don't know when, don't know who, don't know all that stuff. Can we just kind of lay it down and be like, these are the 5 major facts, and everything else is a little bit speculative?
Yeah, definitely. I think the number one thing that we should establish is that he is selling. And I still am kind of surprised when I get tweets, Grant, I'm sure you are too, and people are like, well, what if he backs out? What if this? What if that? Like, all the stuff Grant just said, I'm not just going to cut that up and be like, he's selling. Here's 5 minutes of Grant Paulsen listing all the reasons why. Right? Like, he's not there anymore. He doesn't go to games. You know, they obviously engage the bank, all that kind of stuff. So, number one, he's selling. 2, that sale is going through Bank of America Securities, which has processed a lot of team sales. And he is continued forward through that process. And as far as we know, there's been no reversal or out or anything at any time. I guess the third thing would be this Grant, I think, is a little less like 100%, but we would be stunned if it went in any other way. It's going to be a full sale. Like, Dan Snyder's no longer going to be a part of this team. There was a thought for a while that he was going to try to get minority investors and try to just boost some cash, or, you know, would there be a situation where he potentially sells minority stake within 5 years, they could buy a majority stake. That, I guess, is technically still on the table. We haven't heard definitively because, like Grant said, we don't know all of the details yet because very few people do. But ultimately, I think it's pretty safe to say that Dan is going to be out of the franchise, out of the league as of the sale being finalized, which I think is going to happen fairly soon.
Yeah, I mean, and so I want to do exactly what Logan just said for a moment, though, right? What is actually known at this moment, which is that Dan Snyder and Tanya Snyder hired Bank of America in early November to sell part or all of this team. Okay, that is written in pen. That's confirmed by the team. Now, if your threshold is what we actually know as having been kind of confirmed by the team, there's not much after that.
Right.
Okay?
Just so fans are aware of what, but that's a big data point for sure.
It is. I would, and I understand what you're saying. I would tell you the team is not going to confirm anything.
Right.
So
I agree.
If that was the threshold always, then we wouldn't know who's signing where until the press conference, right? So that's not certainly my threshold. My threshold is people I trust. There's a lot of people I've never heard of tweeting about Dan Snyder and coming. I don't care about any of that. Like, the media people that are trustworthy and credible. I mean, Adam Schefter, from a league source, suggested that Rails joined this Josh Harris bid. Here's what I take, frankly, at this point as confirmation: when there's no pushback, when no one comes out and says, "Hey, actually, no, that's not," because I can't tweet that the Commanders should sign an offensive lineman, you know, without a thought from somebody on it, you know, within the team, right? In some way. So when I just think it's important to note, and they're doing other things like that. They're not around. They're not paying attention. So it's not like Dan Snyder or his attorney is going to say, hey, that's actually not true. But there's very little pushback. When Mike Florio reports the other day they haven't been in the building since December, I talked to Mike on my show subsequently, and I've talked to him via text since. He hasn't heard a word from anybody on that. And his point on the show was, hey, if I said something that wasn't right, someone would tell me.
Right.
You know, he's saying the employees think this is imminent. These are all things in other degrees we've talked about on the show. I've heard from employees for months that they thought this thing's going down. So what is actual fact right now confirmed by the team is very little, I would say. But this is one of those you're trying to read the tea leaves deals. And I understand the uncertainty in that, and it is important to clarify that. I would also tell people, like, you shouldn't necessarily be taking any notes on this from just random people who talk to, you know, a player at KB Toys. You know what I'm saying?
Like, they don't know anything either.
Very careful with our the people that are saying things. You know, here's how I like to judge it. If someone has nothing to lose if they're wrong, you shouldn't care if they're right.
Right.
if someone's wrong and nothing happens, like they don't have a boss or an editor, or they just tweet something else the next day, then I wouldn't worry a whole lot about if they're right or not. That's kind of how I judge it. But I understand what you're asking. I think it's an important question.
And so I think what I'm saying is, like, I agree. I think obviously there's that one kind of, they've engaged with the bank to get the sale done. But I do think I agree with you in terms of like factual information. I think that report about the additional kind of person on the Harris bid, I think that's about as good as you're going to get. And then,
and I'll say too, I mean, I know for a fact, just based on how lock solid and multiple my sourcing is, like, at least there was, for a long time, everyone said, well, 1 or 2 people have gone and taken tours. I mean, there have been 3 ownership groups at least. I know a 4th at some point was on the verge of coming through, that have like been over at the facility. I mean,
right.
That kind of stuff's not happening if you're going, hey, maybe we'll think about selling this thing. I also know, I was told the first day all of this came out, literally the first night, so that would have been what, November 2nd, from someone who had talked to Dan about it, that one of his biggest goals, if he sold this team, and at that point, it's day one, there was a lot of speculation that maybe he wouldn't, but one of his biggest goals was, there's no way he's selling this team if he can't get better and bigger than the Broncos by a margin, right? The Broncos sold for $4.6 billion. He has offers, we've reportedly heard, over $5 billion. And I still think he's going to end up getting something that starts with a 6. That's utterly speculative. That's my kind of what I'm hearing. But I think that happened when Rails joined Harris. I think Harris's number, from the people that I talked to, was in the 5s. Rails joined him, and the number got a lot closer to 6, if not, starting with a 6. So point being, I guess if you're asking, what do we know? We know that the thing that was important to him, if he sells this team, I think he wants to be able to claim, I just sold for more than anyone ever has. And if the numbers we're hearing are actually the finish line eventually, not only football, this will be the biggest transaction of a sports franchise in the history of the world. And that is something I know as a fact is important to Dan Snyder if he sells.
Yeah, the Washington Post has reported that Tillman Fertitta's bid, I believe, came in at 5.3 initially, and then we know that, or I think we've heard, I wouldn't say we know, that the Harris Rails bid is now above that, thanks in part to what Grant was saying. That's again more of the what we've heard, not someone hard reporting it, putting a byline to it. And I would say when the Washington Post and Mark Maskey and Nikki Javala and Liz Clark put their bylines on it, you can take that word to be as good as gold. But that's kind of what we know from the numbers standpoint. And then the other thing that we know is that Jeff Bezos is still kind of floating around in the background. What we don't know, what speculation, is how involved he is. But we know that he engaged a brokerage firm, banker. He engaged some financial institution to explore buying the team. For a while, Snyder had kept him out of the bidding, or not permitted him, per the Post, from bidding. But he had formally engaged the process through a banking firm. And so we know that. And I talked to someone, a reporter who covers sports business, last week, who said, my prediction's still Bezos. And that's just kind of if you want to make a football analogy, it's like, the 2017, 2018 range, where the Patriots were kind of struggling through the regular season, but you still kind of just bet on them because they were the Patriots and he was still Tom Brady. And there's kind of an element of that with Bezos, or like LeBron, and during that same stretch where he's just
perfect comp. Yeah.
He's still LeBron James. And so I know they're the 4th seed in the East right now, but they're going to beat the crap out of the Raptors in the playoffs. That's what's going to happen, because he's LeBron James, and they're going to win the East. And then we'll see what happens.
Now, that's
kind of the Bezos thing.
You're on point. I mean, I forever, up until probably 2 weeks ago, was saying Bezos. I do think we can file into the what we actually know column that Dan Snyder would prefer it not be Bezos.
Yes.
Now that
is
do not hear that
true.
as he would never sell the team to Bezos, but he would prefer it not to be Bezos. He doesn't. What we know is he doesn't like the Washington Post. What we know is that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. And what we also know is that Dan Snyder wants to sell to someone other than Bezos if he can get the amount of money he needs. Now, if Bezos gave $1.5 billion more at the last minute than whoever kind of secured the number, would they go that route? Yeah, I guess they would. But frankly, again, and now we're back to, as a final thought, just my own prediction. I think that we are far enough down the road, non-Bezos, that number one, it's happening one way or the other. But also, I would bet on the non-Bezos field getting to a number that Dan views as satisfactory.
Yeah. My only question with Bezos is there an even higher level of satisfaction for Dan if he gets to think that he beat Jeff Bezos in a business deal? And that's purely speculative. That's like some armchair psychologist stuff,
right,
or psychiatrist stuff of like, does Dan get to like go to London and tell all his new London buddies, yeah, I did business with Jeff Bezos and I got $7 billion of his dollars. And the next highest bid was $6 billion. Like, he gets to win the deal and he gets more money. Like, I could see that. But Grant, I think, obviously the smoke right now is much, much more on the non-Bezos camp, which is in the speculation column for sure. But, betting against the richest guy in the room at a business deal is always a risky proposition. So if
the Seahawks weren't going to be sold potentially,
that's also a great point.
Couple of years, I think all of this conversation would be different, because the way I've been told to understand it is Bezos wants in, whether it's Washington or not, into the NFL, right? And he has obviously ties to, I think is from that area.
Yes.
There's no one that hates his guts in Seattle that's going to make it harder for him. So, I mean, like, whether or not this goes well, he'll be a 1 seed playing a 16 seed, and I don't think any of them are going to be fairly guaranteed when the Seahawks come up for bid.
Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.